The ink on the severance agreement was still wet when my mother sneered, telling me I would die penniless in the gutter. She didn't know that my hand trembling as I signed away my rights to the Montgomery family name was resting against my jacket pocket. Inside that pocket was a crumpled piece of paper worth exactly $1.2 billion. I had died once already crushed under the weight of their betrayal, framed for my brother's corporate crimes, and abandoned to rot in a concrete cell. But fate hit the reset button. I am back. And this time, I'm taking the money, dropping the dead weight, and watching their empire burn from a very comfortable distance. The sharp, stinging impact of a leather-bound folder hitting my chest jolted me awake. I gasped, my lungs expanding violently as if I had just broken the surface of a freezing ocean. My vision blurred, adjusting to the blinding crystal chandelier above me. I wasn't in the damp, claustrophobic prison cell where I had drawn my last rattling breath. The smell of rust and decay was gone, replaced by the overpowering scent of lemon polish and my mother's expensive Chanel perfume. "Are you even listening to me, Thomas?" a voice boomed. I blinked, the opulent, mahogany-paneled study coming into sharp focus. Standing before me was Robert Montgomery, my father. His face was flushed red with anger, the veins in his neck pulsing against his perfectly starched collar. To his right sat my mother, Margaret, her legs crossed, sipping tea with an expression of utter disdain. And leaning against the grand fireplace, swirling a glass of scotch with a self-satisfied smirk, was Jason, my golden child older brother. Panic and confusion slammed into me. I looked down at my hands. They were clean. The scars from the prison fights were gone. The malnutrition that had hollowed out my bones was a mere memory. I touched my face. It was full, youthful. I quickly pulled my phone from my pocket and pressed the power button. October 14th, 2023. I almost laughed out loud. It was real. I had read about the concept of rebirth in cheap web novels, but experiencing it was a visceral, mind-shattering shock. I had jumped back exactly 5 years. 5 years before Jason's massive embezzlement scheme was uncovered. 5 years before my family, desperate to save their precious air-forged documents to make it look like I was the mastermind. 5 years before I died of an untreated infection in a maximum security prison abandoned by the very people whose blood ran in my veins. I said, my father barked, slamming his hand on the heavy oak desk. You will take responsibility for the missing funds in the logistics division. We are transferring your 5% equity in Montgomery Enterprises to Jason to cover the loss. In exchange, we won't press charges. You will step down, and you will apologize to your brother. Ah, yes, the logistics scandal of 2023. Jason had gambled away $3 million of company money on a terrible real estate venture and blamed it on a series of authorization errors under my department. In my past life, I had cried. I had begged. I had spent hours trying to prove my innocence, pulling up spreadsheets and emails, only to realize that they didn't care about the truth. They just needed a scapegoat to protect Jason's flawless reputation before his promotion to CEO. In that life, I compromised, gave up my shares, and accepted the blame, hoping to win their love. That single act of submission set the precedent for them to eventually frame me for a $50 million fraud years later. Well, Margaret sighed, setting her teacup down with a delicate clink. Stop standing there like a mute Thomas. Your brother has an engagement dinner to attend tonight. Don't ruin this day for him. Be a man and take your punishment. Jason chuckled, taking a sip of his scotch. "Come on, Tommy. You always were sloppy with the books. Just sign the transfer papers. Dad's being generous by not throwing you to the wolves." I looked at them, really looked at them. In my previous life, I had viewed them through the distorted lens of a desperate son craving affection. Now I saw them for what they were, parasites. My hand instinctively moved to my jacket pocket. A jolt of electricity shot up my arm as my fingers brushed against a piece of thermal paper. The lottery ticket. I remembered it clearly. Yesterday evening, feeling stressed about the missing logistics funds, I had stopped at a dingy gas station on the outskirts of the city to buy a cheap coffee. On a whim, I had purchased a single Quick Pick Mega Millions ticket. The jackpot was at a historic $1.2 billion. In my past life, the chaos of being stripped of my shares and ousted from the company made me completely forget about the ticket. It was washed in the laundry weeks later, destroyed. It wasn't until months later, when the news reported an unclaimed billion-dollar ticket sold at that exact gas station on that exact date, that I realized what I had lost. I took a slow, deep breath. The air had never tasted sweeter. "No," I said quietly. The room fell dead silent. The crackling of the fireplace suddenly seemed deafening. "What did you just say?" Robert demanded, stepping around the desk. I said no. I repeated, my voice steady, devoid of the trembling desperation that had stained my previous life. "I didn't take the money. Jason did. You all know it. I'm not signing over my equity to cover his gambling debts." Jason's smirk vanished. "Watch your mouth, Thomas. You have no proof. And you have no proof I did it other than forged ledgers you drafted on Monday." I countered, locking eyes with him. I saw a flicker of panic in his gaze. Margaret stood up, her face twisted in outrage. "How dare you speak to your brother that way? After everything we have given you, the clothes on your back, the roof over your head. You are an ungrateful, useless boy. If you refuse to take responsibility, then you are no son of mine. We will cut you off completely. You will be disowned, Thomas. Do you understand? Thrown out into the streets with nothing? In my past life, that threat was my greatest fear. It was the weapon they used to break me. Now it was the key to my salvation." "Okay," I said. My father paused halfway across the room. "Okay, what do you mean, okay?" "I mean, I agree," I said, a genuine smile pulling at the corners of my mouth. "Disown me. Cut me off. Let's sever all ties. Right here, right now." For a long moment, nobody moved. The three of them stared at me as if I had suddenly started speaking in tongues. "You're bluffing." Jason scoffed, though his voice lacked its usual arrogant bass. "You wouldn't last a week without the family trust fund. You can't even afford the maintenance on your apartment. Call Simon Peterson." I told my father, ignoring Jason entirely. "Your personal lawyer. Have him draft a complete severance of familial rights. I will surrender my 5% equity in Montgomery Enterprises to the company treasury, not to Jason, but to the company. In exchange, I want a legally binding agreement that severs all obligations between us. You won't be responsible for my debts, and I won't be responsible for yours. Total disinheritance." My mother let out a sharp, mocking laugh. "Robert, look at him. He's throwing a tantrum. He thinks we'll beg him to stay." "I assure you, Margaret, I don't," I said coldly. The use of her first name made her flinch as if she'd been slapped. "You disrespectful little—" "Call the lawyer Robert." I snapped, projecting my voice with a command I had never possessed before. You want me gone? You want the scandal buried? This is your out. Bring Peterson here now. Let's end this. Robert studied my face, his eyes narrowing, searching for the trick. He found none, just a hollow, icy resolve. He pulled out his phone and dialed. Simon, get over to the estate immediately. Bring the standard disownment and equity surrender forms. Yes, now. We waited in silence. I didn't sit down. I stood by the large bay window, watching the rain begin to fall over the sprawling manicured lawns of the Montgomery estate. It was a golden cage, and I had finally found the door. Within 30 minutes, Simon Peterson arrived. He was a weasel of a man in an expensive suit carrying a sleek leather briefcase. He looked nervous, sensing the suffocating tension in the room. Robert, Margaret, Jason. Peterson greeted them, nodding deferentially before glancing at me. Thomas, I have the documents as requested. This is highly irregular. Just print them out, Simon, Robert grunted. Peterson opened his laptop and connected to the study's wireless printer. As the machine hummed to life, printing out my financial and familial execution, Jason walked over to me. I don't know what kind of game you're playing, Tommy. Jason whispered, his breath smelling of expensive liquor. But when you're starving on the streets, don't come crawling back to me. I won't give you a dime. Don't worry, Jason, I whispered back, my eyes fixed on the printer. When the feds start asking about the offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, don't come crying to me for a character reference. Jason turned pale. He stumbled back a step. The Cayman accounts wouldn't be discovered for another 4 years, but dropping the hint now was a sweet, small victory. Peterson arranged the papers on the desk. These documents surrender your equity in Montgomery Enterprises worth approximately $12 million back to the corporate treasury. It also revokes your access to all family trust bank accounts and properties. It formally disavows you as a dependent or heir. I want an addendum, I stated. Robert rolled his eyes. Always making demands. What is it? A mutual non-claimant clause, I said. A guarantee that not only can I never claim a single cent from the Montgomery family, but the Montgomery family can never under any circumstances lay claim to any of my future assets, earnings, or wealth. We are legally dead to each other. Peterson chuckled, exchanging an amused look with my father. Thomas, you are walking out of here with nothing but the clothes on your back. There are no future assets to protect from your family. Then there's no harm in adding the clauses there, I challenged. Add it. Or I don't sign, and you can explain the missing $3 million to the board of directors tomorrow. Robert waved his hand dismissively. Just add it, Simon. The boy is delusional. Let him protect his imaginary future fortune. Peterson tapped away at his laptop, printed the addendum, and slid the stack of papers toward me. I picked up the heavy gold Mont Blanc pen from the desk. I didn't hesitate. I didn't let my hand shake. I signed my name on every line, initialed every page, and pressed the notary stamp Peterson provided. It was done. I was free. I took off my Rolex Daytona, a graduation gift from my father, and placed it on the papers. I reached into my pocket, pulled out the keys to the Porsche 911 parked in the driveway, and dropped them next to the watch. I kept only my wallet, which contained my ID, a few credit cards I would soon destroy, and nestled safely behind my driver's license, the lottery ticket. Pack your things and be out of the guest house by noon, Margaret said, refusing to look at me. I don't need to pack, I said. Keep the designer suits, keep everything. I'm leaving now. I turned and walked out of the study. As I crossed the grand foyer, the front door opened. Standing there shaking an elegant umbrella was Emma, my fiancée, or rather the woman who had spent the last month secretly sleeping with my brother Jason, waiting for the perfect moment to break our engagement and upgrade to the future CEO. She looked up surprised to see me. "Thomas, why are you rushing? Jason said we had family dinner." I looked at her perfectly contoured face, the face I had once loved enough to die for. I felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no sadness. Just the mild disgust one feels when stepping over a puddle of dirty water. "We don't," I said simply. "Have a nice life, Emma. Enjoy, Jason." I walked past her out into the pouring rain. I didn't have an umbrella. I didn't have a car. I walked down the long, winding driveway of the estate, my tailored Italian shoes sinking into the mud. The cold rain soaked through my jacket, but I threw my head back and laughed. A wild, unhinged laugh that echoed through the dark trees. I was 26 years old. I had $0 in my checking account. I was homeless. And I was a billionaire. I spent the first night of my new life in a $30 a night motel on the edge of the city limits. The bed was lumpy. The walls smelled faintly of mildew and stale cigarette smoke, and the neon sign outside buzzed relentlessly. It was the best sleep I had experienced in 2 lifetimes. I woke up at 6 a.m. sharp. My clothes were still damp from the rain, but my mind was crystal clear. I pulled the lottery ticket from my wallet, smoothed out the creases with surgical precision, and stared at the numbers. 4-1, 1-2, 2-3, 8-59. Megaball 14. I pulled out my phone. My heart hammered against my ribs like a caged bird as I loaded the state lottery website. The banner across the top of the screen was bright yellow. Winning numbers for October 13th, 2023. 04, 11, 22, 38, 59. Megaball 14. A singular winning ticket had been sold. The estimated annuity value was $1.2 billion. The cash option, the lump sum I intended to take, was approximately $640 million before taxes. Even after federal and state taxes, I was looking at a net payout of over $400 million in liquid cash. I didn't jump on the bed. I didn't scream. The trauma of my past life had burned away my capacity for reckless jubilation. Instead, a cold, calculating calm washed over me. I knew the statistics. Lottery winners who flaunted their wealth were destroyed by it. Family members became vultures, friends turned into parasites, and the public became a mob. Given the Montgomery family's penchant for ruthlessness, if they found out I had won, they would tie me up in litigation for decades, claiming the ticket was purchased with family funds prior to our severance agreement. They would try to bleed me dry. I had to become a ghost. I needed a lawyer, not a corporate shill like Simon Peterson, but a heavyweight, a shark who specialized in ultra-high net worth anonymity. Using the motel's terrible Wi-Fi, I searched for the best wealth management attorney in the state. One name kept appearing in forums and financial articles praised for his ironclad NDAs, an aggressive defense of privacy. William Bradley of Bradley Sterling and Vance. Wait, no. Bradley Pierce and Company. No Bradley and Associates. I shook my head, my mind playing tricks on me. Just William Bradley, a solo practitioner who took on a maximum of 10 billionaire clients at a time. I managed to get his office on the phone by 8:30 a.m. His secretary tried to brush me off. "Mr. Bradley is currently not accepting new clients without a referral, sir," she said politely but firmly. Tell Mr. Bradley I hold a single winning ticket for Friday's $1.2 billion Mega Millions draw, I replied, keeping my voice utterly flat. I need to establish a blind trust to claim it anonymously, and I am willing to pay a $2 million retainer by the end of the week. If he isn't interested, I'll call his rival in New York. There was a heavy pause on the line. Hold, please. 3 minutes later, a deep, gravelly voice came on the line. This is William Bradley. Where are you right now? A motel off Interstate 9. I said, Do not sign the ticket. Do not tell anyone. I am sending an armored transport car to pick you up. Be in the lobby in 30 minutes. By noon, I was sitting in a high-rise office building overlooking the city skyline miles away from the Montgomery estate. William Bradley was a silver-haired man in his 60s with piercing blue eyes and a demeanor that radiated absolute competence. He reviewed the ticket under a magnifying glass, checked the serial numbers against the lottery database, and finally exhaled a long breath. Congratulations, Thomas, William said, placing the ticket in a fireproof safe on his desk. You are the luckiest man in America. Luck had very little to do with it, I murmured, staring out the window. Let's talk logistics. I want a double-blind trust. I want the trust to claim the prize and an LLC to manage the trust. My name cannot appear on a single public document regarding this money. William nodded approvingly. Smart. Many winners let their ego ruin them. We will establish the Phoenix Trust today. It will take a few days to process the legal paperwork, but I can secure you an advance line of credit based on the verified ticket. Do it, I said. And William, my family, the Montgomerys. I'm aware of them. William said, his tone darkening slightly. A powerful family, ruthless in their acquisitions. I severed all ties with them yesterday. I explained, pulling out my copy of the severance agreement and sliding it across the desk. Review this. Ensure there are no loopholes. They threw me away thinking I was a liability. When their empire crumbles, and it will crumble very soon, I don't want a single legal thread connecting them to my assets. William read through the document, pausing at the mutual non-claimant clause I had forced Peterson to add. A slow, predatory smile spread across his face. This clause? You insisted on this? I did. It's ironclad. They essentially signed away any right to sue you for future earnings in exchange for your equity. Given the timeline, they cannot claim you used their money to buy the ticket, and even if they tried, this clause shuts them down completely. Frankly, Thomas, your father's lawyer, was a fool to sign off on this. He thought I was a broken man, I said quietly. He was wrong. Over the next 2 weeks, the machinery of wealth quietly turned in my favor. The Phoenix Trust successfully claimed the lump sum of the Mega Millions jackpot. No press conference was held. The lottery officials legally allowed the trust's representative, William, to handle the transfer. The day the funds cleared, I was sitting in a private booth at a high-end steakhouse, eating my first decent meal in what felt like a lifetime. My new burner phone buzzed. It was a text from William. Account funded. Check your banking app. I opened the encrypted banking application William had set up for me. The screen loaded. Available balance $412,890,450. I stared at the numbers until they blurred. More money than my father's entire company was worth. More money than my brother Jason would ever see in 10 lifetimes. In my past life, I died over a measly $3 million lie. Now I held the power of a god in the palm of my hand. I opened a separate tab on my phone and navigated to Instagram. I searched for Emma's profile. It was public, as always. The top post was a picture of her and Jason at a lavish engagement party hosted at a 5-star hotel. Jason was smiling, looking every bit the triumphant heir. Emma was holding up her left hand, showing off a massive, ostentatious diamond ring. The caption read, "Cheers to new beginnings and cutting out the toxic energy. So blessed to be with the true man of my dreams. Hashtag Future Mrs. Montgomery." I laughed softly, taking a sip of my red wine. Toxic energy. That was cute. They thought they had won. They thought they had successfully disposed of the family failure and secured their glittering future. They had no idea that Jason's incompetence was already a cancer eating away at Montgomery Enterprises from the inside. They had no idea that in exactly 6 months a major supply chain crisis would hit, exposing their over-leveraged debts and fraudulent accounting. In my past life, they had sacrificed me to survive that crisis. In this life, there was no scapegoat left. I set my phone face down on the table and picked up my fork. The revenge wouldn't be loud. It wouldn't be a screaming match in their study. It would be cold, systematic, and entirely legal. I was going to use my new billions to quietly buy up their debt. I was going to slowly and visibly tighten the noose around Montgomery Enterprises until they were suffocating, begging for a savior. And when they finally discovered who held the chains, it would be far too late. The first thing you learn when you acquire unlimited resources is that revenge is no longer a crime of passion. It becomes an exercise in logistics. Within a month, I had moved out of the motel and into a sprawling 6,000-square-foot penthouse overlooking the financial district. I didn't buy it to show off. No one from my past even knew I was in the same state, but because I needed a fortress, a quiet place to build the guillotine. To manage the lingering phantom anxiety of my past life, I developed a strict routine. Every evening, I would put on my noise-canceling headphones, play a continuous loop of atmospheric ambient music, the kind pilots use to maintain absolute icy focus during turbulence, and methodically clean the black marble countertops of my kitchen. The repetitive grounding motion of wiping away invisible dust kept me anchored. It kept the rage cold and calculating. With William Bradley acting as my legal shield, I established a private equity firm named Obsidian Capital. On paper, it was managed by a board of aggressive, highly paid directors poached from top-tier firms. In reality, I was the sole shareholder, the puppet master, pulling every string from the shadows. My first hire was Valerie Shaw. Valerie was a 34-year-old forensic accountant who had previously worked for the SEC. She had a reputation for being a bloodhound. She could find a misplaced decimal point in a labyrinth of offshore shell companies. More importantly, she had been passed over for a promotion at her last firm because of a nepotism hire. She understood the specific burning hatred I had for entitled heirs like Jason. "I've pulled the public filings and vendor sheets for Montgomery Enterprises," Valerie said, dropping a thick binder onto the glass table in my home office. It was a Tuesday morning in early January. "It's worse than you predicted, boss. They are bleeding cash." I flipped open the binder, my eyes scanning the highlighted figures. "Talk to me, Valerie. Your father's company is heavily reliant on a single supply chain vendor for their Asian imports, Pacific Apex Logistics," she explained, tapping a manicured finger on a pie chart. "But Jason, who I see was recently promoted to Chief Operating Officer, has been aggressively cutting corners. He renegotiated their shipping contracts to save a fraction of a percent. but in doing so, he voided their priority status. If a shipping bottleneck happens, Montgomery Enterprises goes to the back of the line. I smiled, remembering the panic that had consumed my family in my previous life. And the missing $3 million from the logistics division last October. Valerie let out a sharp, humorless laugh. He didn't just gamble it away on bad real estate. He used it to cover margin calls on his personal brokerage account. He's over-leveraged in tech stocks that are currently tanking. To hide the missing company funds, he took out a high-yield short-term bridge loan from a shadow lender called Orion Credit. The interest rate is predatory, 30%. So Jason is secretly servicing a massive debt using company funds, and Montgomery Enterprises is one delayed cargo ship away from missing their Q2 delivery targets. I summarized, leaning back in my chair. Karma is a beautiful mathematical certainty. "What's the play, Thomas?" Valerie asked, her eyes gleaming with predatory anticipation. "We don't attack them," I said softly. "We buy the ground they stand on. Contact Orion Credit. I want Obsidian Capital to purchase Jason's personal debt portfolio at a premium. Then look into Pacific Apex Logistics. If they have any outstanding corporate bonds, buy them all. I want to own the people my father owes money to." Valerie grinned. "Consider it done. We'll have them surrounded by the end of the month." Over the next few months, I became the invisible ghost haunting the Montgomery Empire. Every time Robert tried to secure a new line of credit to cover Jason's mounting operational failures, a mysterious entity, Obsidian Capital, had already bought up the regional bank's commercial paper, giving us veto power over new high-risk loans. They were slowly being suffocated, and they couldn't even see the hands wrapped around their throats. Meanwhile, I watched their facade crumble in real time through the digital window of social media. Emma's Instagram went from posting photos of private jets and Cartier bracelets to vague passive-aggressive quotes about enduring hard times and finding out who your real friends are. The lavish wedding they had planned for June was suddenly postponed indefinitely due to scheduling conflicts. I knew the truth. Jason was out of money, and Robert was beginning to ask questions. The walls were closing in, and I hadn't even fired a single shot. The breaking point arrived in late April, exactly as it had in my previous life, but with far more devastating consequences. A massive labor strike at 3 major international shipping ports paralyzed global logistics. For normal companies, it was a headache. For Montgomery Enterprises, stripped of their priority shipping status by Jason's arrogance, it was a death sentence. Millions of dollars in inventory were stranded at sea. Retail partners began canceling contracts and invoking penalty clauses for non-delivery. The financial hemorrhage was catastrophic. Within 2 weeks, Montgomery Enterprises was facing a $50 million liquidity crisis. If they couldn't find the cash to pay their suppliers and cover their short-term loans, they would be forced to file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. I was sitting in the back of my chauffeured Maybach, reviewing a digital dossier on my tablet, when Valerie called. "They took the bait," she said, her voice crackling with excitement. "Robert just officially defaulted on a $10 million payment to Pacific Apex Logistics. Because Obsidian Capital holds Pacific's debt, we just triggered the acceleration clause. They owe us the full amount plus penalties immediately." "And Jason's personal loan?" I asked, watching the city lights blur past the tinted windows. "Orion Credit officially transferred the paper to us yesterday. Jason missed his interest payment this morning. He is personally in default for $4.2 million. "Excellent. It's time to tighten the noose," I commanded. "Freeze the company's revolving credit line. Issue the formal demand letters. And Valerie, Yes, boss. Make sure the courier delivers Jason's personal default notice to his office, not his house. I want his father to be in the building when it happens. The next 48 hours were a symphony of destruction. Through my network of informants, disgruntled employees at Montgomery Enterprises, who were more than happy to accept an anonymous cash wire for gossip, I got the play-by-play. When the courier dropped off the default notice, Jason had tried to intercept it. But Robert's secretary, already panicked by the frozen credit lines, handed it directly to the CEO. The screaming match that erupted in Robert's office was reportedly so loud that the entire executive floor went dead silent. Robert discovered not only that his company was effectively owned by a faceless private equity firm, but that his golden child, his perfect heir, had embezzled millions to cover catastrophic day trading losses, securing loans against the company's assets without board approval. In my past life, this was the exact moment they had decided to frame me. They had forged the documents, pinned the catastrophic debt on my negligent oversight of the logistics department, and fed me to the authorities to save Jason from prison and keep the board from ousting Robert. But I wasn't there anymore. There was no Thomas to take the fall. I had made sure of that with the ironclad severance agreement. Desperation is a powerful motivator. On Friday afternoon, an email arrived in Obsidian Capital's general inbox flagged urgent by Valerie. It was from Robert. He was begging for a meeting with the managing partners to negotiate a restructuring of their debt. He offered equity board seats, whatever we wanted, just to stop the foreclosure proceedings. I forwarded the email to William Bradley with a single sentence attached. Set the meeting for Monday at 10 a.m. I spent the weekend in a state of zen-like calm. I went for long runs along the waterfront. I ate a simple breakfast of warm bread and cold milk, a grounding habit from my youth that reminded me of who I was before the money, before the betrayal. I didn't feel vindictive. I felt like an auditor balancing a ledger that had been crooked for far too long. Monday morning arrived with a gray, overcast sky. The Obsidian Capital offices occupied the top 3 floors of a sleek glass and steel skyscraper. The interior was minimalist, intimidating, and cold. Black marble floors, frosted glass walls, and a distinct lack of welcoming warmth. I arrived at 9 a.m. dressed in a custom-tailored charcoal suit that cost more than Jason's car. I took my seat at the head of the massive Obsidian conference table. Valerie sat to my right, William to my left. They are in the lobby. The receptionist's voice echoed through the intercom at 9:55 a.m. Mr. Robert Montgomery and Mr. Jason Montgomery. Let them sweat for 15 minutes, I replied. Then bring them up. I turned my chair around to face the floor-to-ceiling windows, my back to the door. I wanted them to walk into the room to feel the crushing weight of the power dynamic before they even saw my face. The heavy oak doors of the boardroom clicked open. I could hear the nervous, uneven footsteps of my father and brother against the marble floor. Gentlemen, please have a seat, William Bradley's deep, authoritative voice commanded. I heard chairs scraping out. The silence in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Mr. Bradley. Robert began, his voice strained, lacking its usual booming arrogance. It was the voice of a man who had not slept in days. I want to thank you and the partners of Obsidian Capital for taking this meeting. We recognize that Montgomery Enterprises has encountered a temporary liquidity bottleneck, but our underlying assets are strong. We are prepared to offer a highly favorable equity exchange to restructure the current debt. A bottleneck, Mr. Montgomery. Valerie interjected, her tone dripping with professional mockery. Your supply chain has entirely collapsed. You are in default on $30 million of commercial paper held by our firm. Furthermore, your chief operating officer." She paused, undoubtedly staring directly at Jason, "is in default on a personal loan of over $4 million, which he fraudulently secured using Montgomery Enterprises collateral." That was a misunderstanding," Jason stammered. His voice was incredibly small. "I have private investors lining up to clear that personal debt. It shouldn't reflect on the company's standing." "Fraud is rarely a misunderstanding, Jason," William stated coldly. "It is a felony. Obsidian Capital does not negotiate with felons. We acquire them, and then we liquidate them." "Please," Robert pleaded, the desperation finally breaking through his pride. "We have spent 3 generations building this company. There must be a deal we can make. We will step down from the board if necessary. We just need an injection of capital to release the shipping containers at the port. Who is the majority shareholder? Let me speak to him directly. I know I can convince him of our long-term value." I took a slow, deep breath. The moment had arrived. The scales of justice were finally tipping back to center. I grasped the armrests of my chair and slowly swiveled around to face the room. Robert was mid-sentence, his hands clasped tightly on the table. When his eyes locked onto mine, his jaw literally dropped. The color drained from his face so fast, he looked as though he might have a stroke. Jason let out a strangled, breathless noise, violently pushing his chair back. He looked like he was staring at a ghost. "Hello, Father." "Hello, Jason," I said, leaning forward and resting my elbows on the cold obsidian table. For a full 10 seconds, nobody moved. The air in the room felt perfectly still. "Thomas," Robert whispered, his eyes darting frantically around the room, looking at William, then at Valerie, and back to me. What are you doing here? Are you working for them?" Jason's face suddenly contorted with a mix of shock and returning arrogance. "You little rat! Did you get a job here as an analyst? Are you the one feeding them our internal data? Dad, I told you he's trying to sabotage us from the bottom." I didn't blink. I just let him rant, watching the pathetic display of ego, trying to shield a fragile reality. "Mr. Montgomery," William said, his voice slicing through Jason's outburst like a razor, "I suggest you address my client with the respect his position demands." "Your client?" Robert echoed, his voice shaking. "Allow me to introduce the sole founder, owner, and primary capital provider of Obsidian Capital," Valerie said, gesturing toward me with a slight satisfied smile. "Mr. Thomas. Well, just Mr. Thomas. He recently dropped his surname." "No," Jason spat, standing up abruptly. "That's impossible. He's a broke, disowned loser. We cut him off 6 months ago. He didn't even have a car. How could he possibly own a private equity firm?" "By realizing that the best thing you ever did for me was let me go," I said, my voice eerily calm, filling the quiet room. "You threw me away to protect a thief. You told me I would die in the gutter. But you forgot one crucial detail about me, Jason. I was always better at math than you." I slid a sleek black folder across the table toward Robert. "What is this?" Robert asked, his hands trembling as he reached for it. "That is the full extent of your failure, Robert," I explained. "It contains the proof of Jason's initial $3 million embezzlement, which you tried to force me to take the blame for. It also contains the irrefutable evidence of the additional funds he stole over the last 6 months to cover his tracks. And finally, it contains the legal paperwork confirming that Obsidian Capital now owns 82% of your outstanding debt. Robert flipped open the folder. As his eyes scanned the documents, the very documents that would have sent me to prison in my past life, he began to hyperventilate. He looked at Jason, a mixture of horror and pure, unadulterated rage twisting his features. "You," Robert choked out, glaring at his favorite son. "You forged the board's signatures on these bridge loans. Dad, I can explain. I was going to make it all back," Jason cried, backing away toward the door. I tapped my pen against the glass table, drawing their attention back to the executioner. "Here's the deal, Robert," I said, my tone strictly business. "I will not restructure your debt. I will not bail you out. I am calling in every single cent you owe me effective at close of business today." "You'll bankrupt us," Robert yelled, tears of panic finally brimming in his eyes. "You'll destroy your own family's legacy." "We have no family," I reminded him softly. "You saw to that. Simon Peterson drafted a very specific severance agreement. Remember, a mutual non-claimant clause. You are legally dead to me. And as of 5 p.m. today, Montgomery Enterprises will be financially dead to the world. Please, Tommy." Jason begged, his arrogance completely shattered. He actually fell to his knees, gripping the edge of the table. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'll do anything. I'll go to rehab. I'll confess. Just don't do this. Emma will leave me. I'll have nothing." I looked down at the man who had ruined my previous life, the man who had slept with my fiancée and watched me rot. I felt a profound, overwhelming sense of peace. The universe had balanced the equation. "Emma has already left you, Jason," I informed him, checking my watch. "Valerie sent her a copy of your personal bankruptcy filings about 20 minutes ago. As for the rest of it, that's between you, your father, and the federal prosecutors I CC'd on that dossier." I stood up, buttoning my suit jacket. "William Valerie, begin the foreclosure proceedings. Liquidate their assets." I looked back at the two broken men shivering in the sterile boardroom. "Have a nice life in the gutter, gentlemen." The fallout was not a slow leak. It was a catastrophic dam failure. By 5:01 p.m. that Monday, Valerie had filed the injunctions. By Tuesday morning, the financial world woke up to the smell of blood in the water. The Wall Street Journal ran a front-page expose on the sudden and violent collapse of Montgomery Enterprises. The headline read, "A Legacy Liquidated: How a Mysterious Debt Acquisition Firm Brought Down a Logistics Empire." I sat in my penthouse sipping a black coffee, watching the financial news network scramble to dissect the corpse of my father's life work. They didn't know the name Thomas. Thanks to the labyrinth of LLCs William Bradley had constructed, Obsidian Capital was legally represented by a faceless board. To the world, Montgomery Enterprises had simply fallen victim to its own gross incompetence and the predatory nature of high finance. But my family knew, and the knowing was driving them insane. My burner phone, a number only William and Valerie possessed, buzzed on the marble counter. "Boss." Valerie's voice came through crisp and professional, though I could hear the faint hum of amusement beneath it. "We have a situation in the lobby. A woman claiming to be Margaret Montgomery is demanding to see the CEO. Security stopped her at the elevators, but she's making quite a scene, threatening to call the press. Do you want me to have her escorted out by the police?" I stared at the city skyline, the morning fog rolling over the glass towers. In my past life, Margaret's shrill, demanding voice was enough to make my stomach tie itself into knots. Now it felt like a distant, irrelevant static. "No police," I said softly. "Bring her up to conference room B. Let her wait for 20 minutes. I'll handle it." When I finally pushed open the frosted glass door of conference room B, Margaret looked like a ghost of her former self. Her usually impeccable blonde hair was slightly frizzy, and the heavy designer makeup couldn't hide the deep, exhausted bags under her eyes. She was wearing a trench coat tightly wrapped around herself, pacing the floor like a caged animal. She stopped dead when she saw me. "Thomas," she breathed, her voice trembling. For a second, a fleeting, desperate smile crossed her face, a grotesque imitation of maternal warmth. "Thomas, my boy." She took a step toward me, arms slightly raised as if to embrace me. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I just looked at her with the same detached curiosity one might reserve for a specimen in a jar. She stopped, letting her arms fall awkwardly to her sides. You look so well," she stammered, her eyes darting around the austere, expensive room. Your father and we've been trying to find you for months. We were so worried." "Save it, Margaret," I said, bypassing her to sit at the edge of the conference table. "Your husband tried to sell me out to save Jason, and you helped him pack the bags. You told me I'd die penniless. You signed the severance agreement. So skip the reunion act. Why are you here?" Her face hardened, the brief flash of fake warmth melting away, to reveal the bitter, panicked woman underneath. "You have to stop this, Thomas. Robert had a mild heart attack last night. He's in the hospital. The stress, it's killing him. And Jason, the feds raided his townhouse this morning. They took his computers. They're talking about wire fraud. 10 to 20 years. They aren't just talking about it," I corrected her calmly. "They have the forged ledgers. They have the wire transfer receipts from the Cayman accounts. They have everything because I gave it to them. Jason stole company money to cover his gambling, and when the supply chain failed, he tried to steal more. He's going to federal prison, Margaret. That is a mathematical certainty. Tears genuine. Tears of terror spilled down her cheeks. He's your brother. He shares your blood. How can you do this to your own family? We gave you life, and you tried to take it away." I replied, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous whisper. "You sacrificed me to the wolves so your golden boy could keep playing CEO. You cut me off legally and emotionally to protect yourselves. You don't get to invoke the sacred bond of family only when the gun is pointed at your head." I stood up, walking slowly toward her. She shrank back against the glass wall. "I didn't destroy Montgomery Enterprises," I told her, my eyes locked onto hers. "Jason destroyed it with his greed. Robert destroyed it with his blind arrogance. All I did was buy the debt, pull back the curtain, and let gravity do the rest. I am merely the consequence of your own actions." "What do you want?" she sobbed, burying her face in her hands. "You've taken the company. You've ruined Robert. You're sending my son to prison. We have nothing left. Our personal accounts are frozen. The bank is foreclosing on the estate next week. We are destitute. What more could you possibly want from us?" "I want nothing," I said simply. "That's the beauty of the severance agreement you forced me to sign. We owe each other absolutely nothing. You are a stranger to me, Margaret. A stranger who made a series of terrible investments and went bankrupt." I walked over to the door and opened it. "Valerie will have security escort you out," I said, not looking back at her. "Do not come to this building again. If you try to contact me, my lawyers will file a restraining order for harassment. Goodbye." I walked out, the sound of her muffled, hysterical sobbing fading as the heavy door clicked shut behind me. I felt no triumph. I felt no guilt. Just an overwhelming, echoing emptiness that was slowly being filled with absolute peace. The tumor had been completely excised. 3 weeks later, the physical remnants of the Montgomery legacy were dismantled. Montgomery Enterprises officially filed for Chapter 7 liquidation. The assets were auctioned off to the highest bidders to pay back the creditors, primarily Obsidian Capital. Jason was formally indicted on 4 counts of corporate fraud and embezzlement. Denied bail due to the sheer volume of missing funds and his status as a flight risk, he was remanded to a federal holding facility. The irony was not lost on me. He was sitting in the exact same concrete cell block I had died in during my previous life. Then came the centerpiece of their ruin, the Montgomery estate. It was a sprawling gated mansion in the most exclusive zip code of the state, an obnoxious monument to new money and old ego. The bank foreclosed on it rapidly to cover Robert's heavily leveraged personal loans. The public auction was held on a crisp Tuesday morning in a downtown municipal building. I didn't attend personally. William Bradley went in my place holding a proxy bid from a newly formed shell company under my trust. When William returned to my office that afternoon, he placed a manila envelope on my desk. "The deed is yours, Thomas. We acquired the property for pennies on the dollar. The market was severely spooked by the federal investigation surrounding the family. No one wanted to touch it." I looked at the deed. It felt light. "And Robert and Margaret?" "They vacated yesterday," William said, taking a seat. "From what my investigators tell me, they've rented a small 2-bedroom apartment in the industrial district. Robert's health is failing, and the legal fees for Jason's defense have completely drained whatever hidden cash reserves they had left." I nodded, sliding the deed into a drawer. "File the permits for demolition, William. Have the house leveled. Tear up the driveway. Rip out the foundation." William raised an eyebrow, a rare show of surprise from the veteran lawyer. "Demolition? It's a $30 million structure, Thomas. Even in a distressed market, you could flip it for a massive profit." "I don't need the profit," I said. "And I don't want a monument to their ego standing in my city. Level it. Once the land is cleared, we're going to establish a land trust. Turn those 10 acres into a public botanical garden. Something quiet. Something that actually breathes life into the world instead of choking it." William smiled softly, tapping his briefcase. "A botanical garden. I think that's a brilliant investment, Thomas. Consider it done." As William left, my private line buzzed. It was the concierge down in the lobby of my residential building. "Mr. Thomas, apologies for the interruption." The concierge said, his tone hesitant. "There is a young woman here. She slipped past the outer gate behind another resident. She's refusing to leave the lobby, claiming she's your fiancée. A Miss Emma. She wouldn't give her last name." I let out a slow sigh. The vultures were always the last to starve. "Send her up to the private lounge on the 40th floor, I instructed. "I'll be down in 5 minutes." The private lounge was reserved for penthouse residents, a sleek, quiet space with panoramic views of the harbor. When I stepped out of the private elevator, Emma was standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows, clutching a cheap designer knockoff bag. She looked rough. The pristine, manicured socialite from 6 months ago was gone. Her hair was unkempt, her clothes were wrinkled, and the arrogant sparkle in her eyes had been replaced by the frantic, calculating gaze of a survivor looking for a lifeboat. Thomas, she gasped, rushing toward me the moment she saw me. Oh my God, Thomas, I've been trying to reach you for weeks. She tried to throw her arms around my neck, but I caught her by the wrist, gently but firmly stopping her in her tracks. I stepped back, creating a physical barrier between us. You're trespassing, Emma, I said, my voice deadpan. No, please just listen to me. She begged, tears instantly springing to her eyes. She was an excellent actress, I had to give her that. I made a mistake. A horrible, terrible mistake, Jason. He manipulated me. He brainwashed me into thinking you were the bad guy. He told me you were abusive, that you were stealing from the company. I was confused, Thomas. I was scared. Oh, you were greedy. I corrected her, walking past her to pour myself a glass of sparkling water from the bar. You saw the heir apparent, and you saw the scapegoat. You made a calculated lateral move to secure your lifestyle. It wasn't brainwashing, Emma. It was accounting. That's not true, she cried, stepping closer. I always loved you. When they threw you out, my heart broke. I wanted to go with you, but Jason threatened to ruin my family if I left him. But now I know the truth. I know who you really are. We can start over, Thomas. You and me, just like we planned. I took a sip of my water, looking at her over the rim of the glass. In my past life, her betrayal had been the final stab wound that bled me dry. I had laid in that prison cell, staring at the ceiling, wondering what I did wrong, wondering why I wasn't enough for her. Now, looking at her desperate, lying face, I realized she was nothing more than a parasite, looking for a new host. Do you know why I let Jason take you? I asked her quietly. She blinked, confused by the question. What? When I found out you two were sleeping together before the family meeting, I could have exposed you. I lied seamlessly. In truth, I hadn't known until after the rebirth, but she didn't need to know that. I could have ruined Jason's reputation right then, but I didn't. Because you were a liability, Emma. You are a depreciating asset. You require constant capital, constant attention, and the moment a higher bidder walks into the room, you jump ship. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish suffocating on dry land. The fake tears stopped flowing, replaced by a flash of genuine anger. I let Jason take you? I continued, setting the glass down, because I knew you would bleed him dry. And you did. So in a way, I should thank you. You were instrumental in his downfall. You're a monster, she hissed, the mask completely slipping. You're a cold, unfeeling sociopath. You destroyed your own family. You destroyed Jason, and now you're just going to laugh at me. I have nothing. I have $50,000 in credit card debt from the wedding planning. I'm ruined. Then I suggest you file for Chapter 11. I replied, pressing a button on the wall panel to summon security. It worked wonders for the Montgomerys. Goodbye, Emma. 2 large security guards stepped out of the service elevator a moment later. Miss Emma is leaving, I told them. Please escort her off the premises. If she returns, have her arrested for trespassing. She didn't scream or fight as they led her away. She just stared at me with wide, hollow eyes, finally realizing that the man she thought she could manipulate had died a long time ago. The Thomas she was looking at was made of iron and ice. A year passed. The financial wreckage of Montgomery Enterprises faded from the news cycles, replaced by the next scandal, the next corporate collapse. Jason was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole. I was told that Robert attended the sentencing, leaning heavily on a cane, while Margaret sobbed in the gallery. I wasn't there. I was 3,000 miles away, sitting on a balcony overlooking the Swiss Alps, reviewing a quarterly report for Obsidian Capital. The vengeance had been executed perfectly. It was surgical, legal, and absolute. But as the months turned into a year, I realized something profound. Revenge is merely the demolition phase. It clears the rot, but it doesn't build the house. If I spent the rest of my life obsessing over the ashes of the Montgomery family, I would still be their prisoner. They would still own my mind, even if I owned their debt. So I let them go. Truly, completely let them go. I handed the day-to-day operations of Obsidian Capital over to Valerie, making her a senior managing partner with a massive equity stake. She had earned it. Under her ruthless but ethical leadership, the firm shifted from distressed debt acquisition to venture capital funding, green energy startups, and medical research facilities. I returned to my city on a quiet Tuesday in early spring. I didn't take the Maybach. I drove myself in a modest sedan to the outskirts of the wealthiest zip code in the state. I parked the car and walked up a newly paved pathway. Where the towering, oppressive gates of the Montgomery estate once stood, there was now a simple, elegant, wrought iron archway. A bronze plaque on the stone pillar read, "The Phoenix Gardens, open to the public." I walked through the gates. The transformation was staggering. The massive, gaudy mansion had been entirely erased from the earth. In its place was a sprawling 10-acre sanctuary. Winding stone paths weaved through vibrant patches of wildflowers, ancient oak trees, and perfectly manicured hedges. In the center, where the grand foyer used to be, sat a massive, serene koi pond, fed by a gentle waterfall. There were people everywhere. A young couple pushing a stroller, an elderly man reading a book on a wooden bench, a group of teenagers laughing near the cherry blossoms. No one looked at me. No one knew who I was. To them, I was just another face in the crowd, enjoying a beautiful spring day. I found a quiet bench near the edge of the property and sat down. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath of the fresh floral air. The heavy, suffocating scent of lemon polish and expensive perfume was gone forever. I thought about the man I used to be, the desperate, anxious boy who just wanted his father's approval, the man who died in a concrete cell, betrayed by everyone he loved. I felt a brief pang of sorrow for him, but it faded quickly, washed away by the warmth of the sun on my face. He was dead, and I was finally alive. I reached into my jacket pocket. I pulled out a small laminated piece of paper. It was a photocopy of the winning Mega Millions ticket. I had kept the copy as a reminder not of the money, but of the exact moment my life fractured and reset. A gentle breeze swept through the gardens, rustling the leaves above me. I looked at the numbers one last time. Then I struck a match, held the flame to the edge of the laminate, and watched it melt and curl into black ash. I dropped the remnants into a nearby metal trash bin. I didn't need the reminder anymore. I didn't need the anchor to the past. The money had given me the power to destroy the cage, but only I could give myself the permission to fly away. I stood up, adjusting my collar, and walked back down the path toward the exit. I didn't look back. I had a dinner reservation in an hour, a flight to Tokyo the next morning, and an entire unwritten lifetime stretching out before me. For the first time in 2 lives, I was truly, completely free. If this story of ultimate karma and the cold, calculated dismantling of toxic families kept you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button right now. We all know someone who takes advantage of others, and seeing the ultimate payback is exactly the kind of justice we love to deliver. Don't forget to share this video with anyone who needs a reminder that the truth always comes out and the universe balances the scales. Subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell so you never miss out on our daily high-stakes revenge stories and dramatic rebirth tales. Now I want to hear from you. If you found out you had $1 billion lottery ticket in your pocket while someone was trying to ruin your life, what would be your very first move? Drop your master plans in the comments below.